Welcome to For the Love of Books, a podcast by North Lanarkshire Libraries. Hi everyone, welcome back to the North Lanarkshire Libraries podcast For the Love of Books. My name is Chris Wilson, the E-Services Librarian, and today for our podcast I have caught up with a local author called Kate Fridriks, and she has written a book called Real Gone Kid, and it's all about growing up in Ravenscraig and the kind of Steelworks area, and it's a kind of coming of age story from the main character Aileen and what happens in her life and the kind of sectarian divide of the community at that time, set in the kind of 1980s, and lots of other kind of stuff about how just life growing up in the 80s around about that time in that area. It's a fantastic read and it's definitely worth listening to, but reading even, sorry. And to tell us a little bit more about it, I have got Kate here and she will tell us all about it. Listen up. Hi Kate, thanks for joining me on the podcast today. Now, before we get stuck into talking about your book a little bit, I thought I would find out a little bit about you. I know you're now based down south, but you've recently been back up to visit whenever you were doing we were doing the Damien Barr event. Are you from North Lanarkshire originally? Is that where you were originally from?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really proud to come from North Lanarkshire and the sort of steel heritage. So I was born in Bellshill maternity, like many. Spent my first 9 months in Craigneuk, then the next 3 years in Fordwood, then 3 years in South Africa, then 11 years in Craigneuk, and then my family moved to Motherwell and I moved to Dundee for university. So yeah, I'm very much born and bred in North Lanarkshire.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I can join you in the Bellshill Maternity Club there. That's where I was born too. And now your bio on your website shows that you've been travelling quite a lot, and you mentioned obviously living there in South Africa a little bit, but you've kind of travelled about quite a lot more than that as well, haven't you? What's some of your favourite places that you've been to and visited?
Wow. I've been really lucky. I've done a few road trips around, for example, the US and France, various bits of Europe. But my favourite bits is when I decided to backpack in sort of like my mid-30s. I literally sold my house and bought a one-way around the world ticket and started off travelling around Central America, South America, Australia, New Zealand and Southeast Asia and Africa. So basically the Southern Hemisphere. I was really, really lucky.
Wow.
Picking a favourite is really hard. South America, I had to learn Spanish, so I got dropped in it. Because I definitely don't speak English. South America, Brazil, I mean, you can just imagine the Amazon, the Iguazu waterfalls, just all the sort of culture in Brazil. Then there was Bolivia, Chile, Peru, Argentina, fantastic, absolutely amazing places, brilliant to visit. And then on to New Zealand again. It's got the sort of, it's very familiar, isn't it, after South America? So yeah, New Zealand was what I thought as well. Yeah, so basically it was absolutely gorgeous. And then Africa, wow, Africa, all the different countries in Africa. We travelled through 10 countries in Africa. We overlanded and we camped, had lots of adventures. We climbed Kilimanjaro. We, met the local peoples, all the different local peoples. It was just, Africa had like a rhythm to it. It was really, really special, Africa as well. So I can't really choose because they were all different in their own rights, but such a privilege to have, be able to visit.
That sounds like an amazing experience, because it pretty much sounds like you've almost travelled the whole entire world. Look at this.
Well, there's countries that I've missed out, but yeah.
pretty much touched all the major bases all the way around there. And during part of that, I believe that you can almost experience your own personal little romance novel of its own, because you travelled to Argentina, you met an Icelandic man, and obviously you're Scottish, so it's a bit of a kind of a random mix of people. Definitely sounds a bit of a love story for me there in that somewhere as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So I met Jon, my husband, at 7:30 outside the town hall in Bariloche, which is the gateway to Patagonia. And him and I and some other random strangers were all waiting on like a chicken bus. So it's like one of these little buses that takes you down south over 4 days. and it's all cracked windscreens and sort of held together with like rosary beads and just hoping it makes the journey. So I met him then, and I remember saying to him, you know, where was he from? And he told me he's from Iceland, and everybody that I was meeting was British, German, Swedish, French, Italian, Spanish. And I remember saying to him, oh, I've never been to Iceland, not realising, you know, 6 months later I'd be moving there, and the year after I'd be marrying him. So yeah, so I met my very own Viking, but it happened to be in Argentina. So yeah, and 18 years later we're still together.
That sounds fantastic, and the whole travel thing, I think, sounds like a great experience, and no doubt it's kind of put you in good stead for hopefully some future writing as well, possibly. So,
yeah.
And to move on to your writing a little bit, obviously you've had all that excitement of traveling the world and living all over the place, but you've also now managed to fit in writing your first novel, which is called Real Gone Kid. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So Real Gone Kid is a coming-of-age story. It's a romance stroke women rising performance story. It's set in 1984 in a North Lanarkshire steel town in the sort of shadows of the Ravenscraig. It tells the story of a young girl who secretly takes up boxing at a time when women didn't box in order to defend herself and her vulnerable younger sister out in the streets. So that's what it's about. Originally, basically I made a promise to my dad I would write a book.
Right.
That was my why, right? So
okay.
I then spent the next 17 years thinking, how the heck do you write a book? What's the book going to be about? All that. And in the summer of 2019, I just thought, right, I'm going to do this. So I just pulled together all my notebooks and scraps of paper, you know, in the back of bus tickets where I'd written down a character ID and all the rest of it. And I pulled it all together. And as I pulled it together, I realised that over all those years, I'd been trying to write the same story. And the story was set in a Lanarkshire steel town in the 1980s. I didn't know what was going to exactly happen, but I just started writing it, Chris. And the more I wrote it, the more a story developed about this young girl and how she was, you know, she was suffering bullying, but how was she going to rise? And I used to go up at 4 a.m. and write for a couple of hours before I went to work. And then I'd come home, do the dinner, put my wee boy to bed. I'd go to bed, get up at 4 a.m. I did that for 4 months solid to get the first draft done because I was fed up listening to myself saying, I'm going to write a book. So I did. I drafted the first 70,000 words. And I remember like just sitting there thinking, how's she going to rise? What's she going to do? And then it came to me like, boxing. I was like, oh yeah, brilliant. She can box. She can learn how to box. That's how she can stand up against the bullies. And then I thought, oh no, women didn't box in the 1980s. And then I thought, even better, she can secretly box. So that sort of added the next phase. Actually, I've had Jane Couch, who's the ambassador for women's professional boxing. She's been brilliantly supportive for the book because, of course, she was sort of leading the way in the sort of 90s for women to be able to box professionally. So yeah, so it was good. It took off on a tangent I could never have realised. It's sold in 27 countries now. I'm getting messages from readers in Mexico and Taiwan, and it's amazing how sort of universal the story is, even though it's set in like a small town in Lanarkshire.
So all that travelling, all that came good then, since you've got a fan base all over the world already. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure I read somewhere that it's kind of partly kind of based on your own experiences a little bit. So how much of your own experiences is that? Like, are you trained in boxing, or is that kind of part of the made up stuff, or how much of it was kind of your own experience?
Oh, brilliant. So some of it is, I am a runner, like Aileen, the main character. So yeah, I've done 13 marathons and I don't know, many half marathons, all the rest of it. So I am a runner. I know how to run. I've done boxing in a boxing gym and I've done boxercise, but obviously I've never boxed competitively or even as an amateur. But it's a sort of culture that I was fascinated by, like that. The sort of whole area around boxing. So I had some experience of boxing, but I'm not a boxer. Obviously, I grew up in a steel town. I grew up in the 80s in a steel town. I experienced the sectarianism, yes, but is it my story? No. I was listening to Irvin Welsh recently, and he was saying that there's a part of every writer in their books. There's some aspect of them. So I do agree with that, but it's not my life story, if you like, but very much based on experience. You're right, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah, so to kind of turn about more to the story a little bit, obviously Aileen's story is as a teenager growing up in the sort of Ravenscraig area, and there's quite a few kind of major topics that I think I felt made it quite a real story for anyone kind of that age, and it kind of talks a lot about, there's a lot of music mentioned in the story. Obviously there's relationships is a big part of it, and of course the sectarian divides of society and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That kind of provides sort of most of the kind of central themes of the book, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It's kind of, those are like the kind of backdrops to the main story of Aileen, Rising. Certainly, as you know, I'm sure you've experienced it, like sectarianism, the Catholics Protestant thing was pretty bad in the 80s, and before that, it's not as bad now, thank goodness. The music, yeah, I mean, we just grew up on music. Music was your identity, wasn't it? If you were like a skinhead, if you were into the Jam, if you were a new romantic, whatever it was, and then those were the badges on your school blazer, so it definitely sort of defined you. And being Scottish, of course, I grew up in a very musical family. There were musicians, there were singers, there were guitarists, there were keyboardists, and then on the other side of the family, they were great storytellers. So it's that kind of, I think it's quite a Celtic Scottish thing, isn't it, where you've got that whole blend. And then finally, the relationships, of course, relationships are core to the coming of age story. It's about self-identity, finding out who you are within your family group, within your peers, and then from your wider networks as well. So, you make mistakes and all of that, and actually you keep making mistakes, but at least, you start learning a little bit more about yourself. So yeah, so there's a family and there's the friendships, and then there's relationships with boys. So that's kind of explored in the book as well.
Yeah, and like I said, one of the parts of the book that I really did enjoy was the kind of fact that it had that kind of musical kind of element to it, and obviously it's named after a very famous song as well, but it also includes lots of things like listening to the top 40 on the radio, or going to local gigs and buying records and stuff like that. I think I would quite like to have seen the band that's mentioned, the Clyde Alloys myself. Was music, like you were saying, some of your family was kind of musical and stuff like that. So music was quite a big part in your life kind of growing up as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And my first couple of boyfriends were in bands and stuff like that. So there's some of that experience in there. But also, I mean, the Clyde Alloys, again, sort of highlighting the steel heritage. I wanted them named after a steelwork, so they were named after the Clyde Alloy. And the band starts off as like a living room punk rock band who can't play very well and all the rest of it. And then as they're sort of progressing, the main male character, Steve, joins. He's from Liverpool. He's an experienced band member, so he kind of helps them up their ante. And then they're doing cover songs, so like Big Country, U2, Simple Minds, etc. And then they're starting to write their own stuff. So we leave them at the end of the book where they're writing their own stuff, and we'll find out more about what happens to them as the series progresses. But yeah, music was just such a, taping the top 40 religiously every Sunday, sitting there with your pals, dancing, making up wee dance moves. I mean, we still do it now. We girls still do it now. It's just fun, isn't it? Music's just fun. But the other thing that I did with it, I don't know if you're aware, Chris, but I actually put together a free Spotify playlist to the book. It's called The Soundtrack.
I thought I did see this somewhere, but I haven't managed to check it out yet. So I will have to kind of look that up. But I'm pretty sure I did read that, or maybe you mentioned that to me previously as well. But that's one of the great things about kind of modern technology. You can add those kind of little aspects to kind of books and stuff like that. But one of the things that I was like, there's a whole generation of kids now who won't know the challenge of having to try and press the record button at the right moment at the top 40 whenever it's on the radio to get your song listed. They can just look up Spotify and find it straight away.
Exactly.
It's a kind of forgotten art form, isn't it?
It is. And then and the mixtapes as well. I mean, that was like the form of communication when we were younger as well, is like, like a tape of love songs, or a tape of like the best songs of the summer, or, whatever it was. But somebody taking the time and dedication to put that tape together, and even if it was kind of taking some songs off the radio, which we weren't supposed to do. But yeah, so yeah, really, really, really good fun. Yeah, definitely.
Obviously, another big part of Aileen's life is relationships, whether that be kind of friends or families, or of course boys as well. Let's start a little bit with kind of friends side of thing. Despite being kind of on the opposite sides of the kind of Catholic Protestant societal divides, she's got a very special friend in the book, Doll, hasn't she?
Yeah. So she meets Doll through running. Both are really good runners, and they represent their school and they represent the local county. Doll's like a speed runner, and Aileen's an endurance runner, but they're both good in their own ways. So that's how they met, was through the running club. But despite the difference in their religions, they got on really, really well. They do all the girly things together. From Aileen's point of view, because Doll's older, Doll's almost like a little bit of a mother figure to her, because she's more confident, she's more worldly wise, etc. And then for Doll, Aileen's almost like the little sister she didn't have, that you can share secrets and you can dress up and you can advise on fashion and all the rest of it. So it's a symbiotic relationship that we see develop again. I mean, the best friends thing, like my best friend was in the Orange Lodge at that time, so it was kind of a reflection of our friendship. The religion didn't come into it. We knew one was in the lodge, one went to chapel, Catholic, Protestant, etc. But it was never discussed. It was never part of our relationship, if you like. So it was important for me to show different aspects of friendships and how friendships can flourish in different environments.
Yeah, and it's a lovely friendship that they've got in the book, and there's so many kind of nice little personal moments that they have all the way through, and it's one of that was one of kind of my favourite kind of parts of the book, was kind of seeing their kind of friendship kind of develop and things as well. On the kind of family side of things, now due to kind of some sort of tragic circumstances in the book, Aileen I felt as if she kind of had to adopt a bit of a dual role to her little sister Mary, where she was obviously her sister, but she has to kind of take on a bit of a sort of motherly role as well, which is quite a lot for a kind of teenager to take on, especially when she's facing all the other stuff that's going on in her life as well, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. So Aileen loses her mother when she's 12, and she's devoted to her mum and obviously devastated. In those days, you're not really taught how to deal with grief, and I guess you still aren't. It's still a subject nobody knows a lot about. But yeah, so she's trying to deal with her own grief. She's going through the early teens, and then she's 16, 17 when we join her. And wee Mary was a tot when her mother died. So yeah, she does take on more of a motherly and protective role, which is again one of the sort of aspects of the book, is how Aileen can no longer keep running away from her problems. She has to make a stand, and it's wee Mary that drives her to do that. And I quite like that kind of protectiveness that she ends up having with Mary, because obviously, like I say, it's quite a key part of the story, which won't give too much away with. But it is a key kind of part to the whole kind of like having to kind of fight back a bit, I feel like, and as well. Now, probably the other part of the kind of relationship sort of stuff is, and possibly the most significant part for Aileen at that point in her life, is boys. Now, she's got a kind of a childhood boyfriend who she kind of feels a little bit as if she's kind of drifting apart from a little bit. They've just kind of got older and kind of went their separate ways a little bit, but they're still together. And then, of course, she meets Steve, and everything kind of changes. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and who Steve is and how that kind of changes a little bit? Wow, yeah. So she's with Paul, and again, that sort of evolves from the experiences that many people have, which is the little house parties and postman's knock, and he fancies you, she fancies you, all that sort of thing. So she's with Paul, and Paul was with her when her mother died, so he was like her companion as well, to help console her after her mother dies. And then the relationship changes to the point where she's like 15, 16, and she realizes that he feels more like a brother, and they have a laugh, but there's nothing really there. So then there's this tremendous guilt that she's dealing with in the book about that. And then Steve, gorgeous, tall, blonde, all the rest of it, fit, etc., walks into her life, and she has never felt like this in her life. And then she starts to realize what real attraction feels like, and she becomes infatuated, and then she falls for him. So it's that different, again, it's the coming of age from like your sort of innocent friendships, relationships, and then it goes into much more deeper relationships later on. So yeah, so Steve was fun to write. He was really fun to write.
Yeah, I think it was the first point where we meet Steve in the story, kind of where she kind of she's on a bus and she meets the guy who is gorgeous and all that sort of stuff, and she gets an instant attraction to him. And I think it's a sharpener she ends up accidentally eating instead of a
Instead
mint
of
or
a
something in
roll.
her pocket. Yeah,
Yeah.
a Rolo. Yeah, which I thought was a hilarious scene in the book, and I can just imagine how many kind of people have done something kind of silly like that in that moment of where they're trying to kind of act all cool and composed, and then they make a complete
Yeah,
idiot of themselves doing
it
something
just goes
silly.
to pot. Yeah. It kind of reminded me of that scene, and a lot of the listeners will remember this, the scene in Dirty Dancing where Baby goes, "I carried a watermelon." You know what I mean? It's that kind of, she's like, "I carried a watermelon." She's like, "What's a lame thing to say?" You know, it's kind of like that. That was the bus scene. It was, she can't believe how she met him, and she didn't know she was going to meet him again either. So, but yeah, no, that made me laugh as well.
Yeah, it's a good moment. Now, obviously, one of the central themes all through the whole entire thing is this sort of religion, and I think it's something that probably quite a lot of readers can relate to because of either the kind of past experience or even, unfortunately, still kind of current experiences and stuff like that as well. And do you think that's something that can be overcome? I kind of think like books like this kind of help in a little bit of way, kind of showing like obviously things like how Doll and Aileen's relationship can kind of be there without kind of the despite them being kind of on opposite sides of that religious divide and stuff. It's a kind of unfortunate part of society in the past, and unfortunately still to this day a bit.
Yeah. So, I think stories like mine and other books that are out there help to just keep the discussion going. I'm thinking of also like the work of Des Dillon, "I'm no a Billy, I'm a Tim," and all that. But that was taught in school. It was good to kind of see that it was taught like from both sides. Why the sort of I would say the rivalry or the distrust, why it sort of came about, and understanding that history, and then also like kind of moving on from it. So yeah, I mean, there's multiple books that cover, and actually speaking to different readers internationally, even here in England, people had no idea that the sectarianism was so bad that at times, not all the time, but it did matter what school you went to and where you worship God and stuff like that. It did matter, and people could experience discrimination because of it, whether they were Catholic or whether they were Protestant. It works on both sides. That was the thing about the book. I tried to strike a balance. It's written from a Catholic girl's point of view, but most of the characters are actually Protestants, so it kind of strikes that balance. And I think that Chris, sorry, that's you, Aileen and Doll have conversations about it after the big incident. So I think it's good to keep the discussions going. I think that the sectarianism isn't as bad now as it was then. It's not as overt as it was. And I think part of that is because then the communities were very inward-looking, insular, and all the rest of it. But since then, the world has opened up through the internet, and we now have more of a world view, I think. So I think that's helping to sort of, dissolve it a little bit.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Just when I thought, I kind of thought of one of the scenes in the book where Aileen's watching one of the kind of orange walks or something like that, and she's happily walking, and there's people walking by and seeing her kind of like enjoying the music, and then they notice her cross, and it's like they instantly change on it, and it's that kind of like that's kind of the sort of thing that you want to kind of highlight a bit as to kind of how people are all the same. They don't need, just because of who they worship or whatever, it doesn't change who they are as a person, and they can, and it's it's odd to kind of think how in the past, and unfortunately, like I say, still today, that kind of mindset is still it had been with people in the past, isn't it? That can kind of change just because of it. Even just seeing like a cross hanging on their chain, they can change their opinion of how to a person. You know, it's
absolutely. Absolutely.
Strange thing. At the end, and you kind of hinted that a little bit earlier on, but at the end of the blurb, it does mention it's the first novel in the Ravenscraig coming of age series. So does that mean there's definitely at least one more book coming then?
At least one more, Chris. I've got like a little line of or a big line of readers saying, when's book 2 going to be ready? So I'm sort of a third of the way through it. I know where it's going. And I will be writing it this year, hopefully to publish it before Christmas. But like many writers, I've got a family and a full-time job, so I fit it in between. But I'll book some leave and I'll get it done because I'm having lots of fun with it. I think local readers and other readers will enjoy the sort of where Aileen goes next, and obviously we still follow the fortunes of Doll and Sandy and Steve and Da and Gran and wee Mary and all that. They're still in book 2, so yeah, it's coming. Yeah,
I was going to ask if all the characters do all kind of make a return to it, so that's quite exciting because yeah, I do think one of the great things about the book is that the characters are so good. They're all they're all easily kind of envisionable and kind of probably if you are kind of around that age, you probably know people kind of similar to it in some way, or have experienced people kind of like it and stuff. So they're quite relatable people, and good and bad ways depending on which character it is. And so I think the characters are fantastic. So it's good to know that we can kind of see a bit more of some of them in the coming books. So is that what's next round the corner for you? Is kind of focusing on the sequel to that, or is there any other kind of books or writing kind of in the way and or anything like that, or even more traveling?
Yeah, the traveling something that has to be on the back burner at the minute. But I'm constantly coming up with new ideas for books, but it's one of them where I write them down and then I park them because I'm writing book 2 of the series and I've only got so much time, and also creative sort of energy. Do you know what I mean? So you've only got so much creative energy and you need to spend it wisely is probably the way to put it. But yeah, no, it's been a terrific journey, and of course I kept that promise to my dad. I published that book and it's dedicated. Real Gone Kid is dedicated to him. So yeah, I'm really proud of that because that was the whole why for the book. But extra bonus is all the readers who've enjoyed it since and are reading it and now buying the audio book as well because Kira Lucchese did a great job narrating it. So that was great fun.
Yeah, I did read the audiobook, or listen to the audiobook, I should say, and it's very well done. The kind of the reading of it adds quite a lot to the story, I think, and I think that's quite an important part to kind of an audio because it's having that kind of real connection with what you're kind of listening to, and I think she does a great job of doing that. But thank you, Kate, for coming along and talking to us about your book. We eagerly await book 2 when it eventually comes out in the future, and thank you very much for telling us all about it.
No problems, and thank you to North Lanarkshire Libraries and you, Chris, for your support.
So there you go, guys. Thank you to Kate for coming along and chatting to us and telling us all about Real Gone Kid. It is a fantastic read. It's based in North Lanarkshire. It's kind of round about the Ravenscraig area, and it's based in the 1980s time frame. And I think lots of people, no doubt, will find it quite relatable in terms of the characters, the storylines, the themes that are involved in the story, and things like that and stuff. And so things that they've probably experienced themselves a little bit in their own lives and stuff like that as well. So it's definitely worth catching it if you get a chance. It is available in our libraries, so do check it out. Go online, kind of have a look on our online catalogue, put a reserve in for it, or even maybe if you're lucky enough, maybe catch it on one of our shelves as well. But that's all for now, guys. Thank you for listening, and we will be back in very, very soon with another podcast very soon for you guys to listen to. Bye for now, guys.